Good morning. All right, let me start Instagram. Well, good morning. Or good afternoon, because I don't know when people are going to see this, watch it. If you're watching live, thank you. I was taking a couple of moments to try to gather my thoughts because I've been thinking about this is part 3, the last part of my reflections of this Baha'i fast. And I've been thinking about it for the last 2 weeks because the fast ended on the 19th of March. It's the 28th. But because I was resuming my life, I could not write things down. And I was like, wait a minute, I know I have something to say. And it all went out of my head because I didn't write it down. So, and that's just definitely, we'll jump into the topic soon. But hopefully you guys are doing well. Welcome back to my little reality of where we talk about little mental health nuggets to help people recover and realign with how you transform your mental health, your life, and design your life however you want to live it. So, it's Friday. I am going to just give you, I really don't have that many post reflections that aren't already been said in part 1 and 2. A lot of it was, about flexibility, challenging my own limits, and ultimately learning to respect my own limits at the same time. Going against kind of my fundamental belief system, and I don't mean from a faith perspective, I mean from like a science perspective of my whole business is about eat for your brain, and your body will follow, really, and you eat for your mental health, because that is one of the biggest and the relationship with food is one of the first control behaviors that the brain honestly disconnects from when we're under an amount of stress, because your body is, it's conserving. It's like, oh, we don't really need that much food. So a lot of my realizations, they were very confirmational to what I do professionally, but then also they expanded a little bit more into what I need to do to still create support systems for people who are still trying to figure out how to take care of their mental health through the relationship with food. However, I already have a main program for that. So DM or leave a comment, Fresh Perspective, and we'll get you started in that program. But it is a commitment. It's a commitment to self. Just the same way that this fast was a commitment to myself. Excuse me, hold on, my cat is making an obscene amount of noise. So part 3 and the last part of my reflections, I think, has everything to do with what my expectations of myself were throughout this whole thing. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I realized that I set pretty lofty expectations for myself about, like, okay, I'm going to use this spiritual fast to journal every day. I'm going to pay attention to and like get back into my routines of stretching and my all that stuff, right? Which I had to manage my perception of what I was going through. Like, I had never gone through this before, this intentional, no water, no food from sunrise to sunset, and how that would affect my energy levels, how that would, even though I transformed my life before fasting. Like, I did not fast. Let's be clear. I did not know intermittent fasting in my weight loss journey. I ate whole foods. I ate volume. I didn't count a whole lot of calories. I just readjusted my perception of how I was doing things and understanding how it affected my body. So I learned a lot in the previous years before this fast about how my body functions. And this particular fast challenged all of that. And it also challenged a lot of the perceptions that I had of myself. And so what I noticed in the last couple of weeks, because 2 weeks ago, I had basically half and half. Half of it was fasting, and then I transitioned out of fasting, and I also left my own environment. I went back into the wild. I was at a conference last weekend around a lot of people, and which it actually helped me, having just come off the fast. I wasn't able to think and prepare the same amount because my brain had honestly just was not able to think that far ahead because was a little bit more dehydrated and I was a little bit more undernourished compared to how often I eat typically for my brain. And so I didn't have, it actually served me to be a little bit more fasting because I was able to kind of go throughout the conference. I didn't have any snacks the first day. I messed up. I wasn't prepared. That was me. They had food there, but conference is like, it's expensive and all that. So, but what I noticed though too was that my perception, my senses, so we think we're in control of our brains most of the time. We're not. We have an ability to influence and redirect our brains, but our brains are really controlled by our senses. So how we collect information. And so I noticed it was actually, I was sitting here in my apartment, and because the weather in North Carolina goes, back and forth, one day I got the air conditioning on, one day I had the heat on. And I noticed that I could smell, when the air came on, I smelled a certain like sweetness to the smell. I would never have probably picked that up if I hadn't been fasting. So a lot of times your body it's taking what it has, it's being resourceful for its fuel source because you're not adding fuel with extra food. And therefore the clarity that comes with fasting that a lot of health professionals do encourage fasting to be able to obtain, those things start to come back. And so I was a little bit more attentive to certain things. Turned out I really did need a filter change. I thought they had just changed the air filter like a couple months ago. No, they hadn't. So that was one thing, is like my perception of my world, my reality was a lot more heightened. Now, in some ways that's a good thing. But when you go out into the general public or you're talking with people who, especially in my profession, who aren't as mindful of the amount of energy that they produce and that they honestly project and displace onto either me or a situation. Now, I consent to that kind of displacement. Most of the general public does not. But it was a lot more intense. So I found myself having to be pretty, and I gave my clients a lot of freedom and choices. If you don't want to see me this week because I am fasting, completely understand. Most of them were very, they're like, no, it's interesting to ask questions about it. Became a topic of learning together versus I never push or even really talk about my faith much in my sessions because it's not what I paid them for. But it became something that I needed to kind of tell them about just to be transparent and to be clear and give them consent to be, if I would say there was a couple of times where I was a lot more direct. Like, I'm a pretty direct person to begin with, but I was a lot more direct because I didn't have as much energy to critically think, for the most part, on how to be intentional as much as possible. So I was definitely more, if you look at the kind of polyvagal chart where it tells you the kind of just if you're in a green, yellow, or red state, I was probably in more of a yellow state just because I was fasting and because I didn't have certain things, nutrients, as well as just food in general, grounding my body. So I think that was one of my biggest takeaways for the last 2 weeks, giving myself half a week of fasting, half a week of not fasting, and being out in general areas, is that a lot of it, I had to manage my own expectations of not only what I could do and in terms of my normal routine and even self-care routines. I was way more tired by the end of the day. And then I also noticed that I was still having some of those old patterns of like resisting, especially when I go to sleep. Sometimes you ever get so tired that you just resist sometimes going to sleep. A lot of times it's because our brains are so overwhelmed by the blue lights, by the cell phones. It still happens to me too. It's just that I have a system more now in place to be able to be like, oh, nope. Like my phone, for example, I have a screen timer on my phone. I took it off for a while and then I put it back on because one of my clients was struggling with it as well. And I was like, so I only set myself like, I think an hour or maybe even 2 hours for social media a day. And then it all it does is basically put a barrier in place for you to like give yourself 15 more minutes. And half the time, like by midday, especially because I post, my accountability workouts on my stories, my time is used up at the beginning of the day, but I still give myself more time. I just brought the choice back. And that's where, when we talk about building the lifestyle of recovery, whether it be from depression, whether it be from autism even, is that we have to learn how to build choice in our lives versus just rely on this concept that everyone's like, oh, I don't have any willpower. Willpower is not a thing. Okay, willpower is this facade of a I'm not going to name any religion, but a religious value that we think is so great and grandiose that we're all supposed to have, and someone's better, has more willpower than the other one. No. Does someone know how to regulate their emotions and have less life stressors than other people? Yeah. Like, that's willpower. So when you see me getting up in the gym 3-4 times a week, I have been doing this for 7 years at this point, and I was not there even 2 years ago as much as I was now. So that's one thing that when you look at someone, especially, and I put the responsibility on these coaches, life coaches, social, especially if you're on social media, if you are promoting a routine, a wellness program, that is specific to them. That is very specific to their lifestyle, to what their needs and their experiences are. And those, because the brain naturally has mirror neurons. So if you watch you can absolutely get something out of watching someone and learning, but you also have to be prepared to accommodate it to yourself. So that's where I was like, this conference, I'm not at a conference every weekend. So I wasn't, and this was my first conference, so I wasn't even prepared to transition from this fast to this conference mode and back to being on all the time. And I was exhausted. And I had booked, like I had a friend that wanted to grab dinner. I had a plan every night because I was like, oh, I'm out of town. My own expectations of like the last time I was in DC, which I was not fasting, is that I was in a social mode. So my brain just was naturally putting those expectations out there because that's what it thought I wanted. If I had to use my willpower, then I would be literally overusing my own energy and probably using more of, and honestly, it comes from your immune system. So that's where it's like, yes, it's flu season, but that does not mean that you have to get sick. That does not mean that if you, let me rephrase that. It means that if you keep your emotional stress low, emotional inflammation, you reduce the amount of physical inflammation in your body. And I don't necessarily mean like all the chronic stress. I just mean stop doing things that you're overusing your physical expenditure limit or being hard on yourself. Your immune system will actually be able to regenerate itself and protect you from the common cold and all that jazz. So I got worked up on that one. So we bring it down. So that was my first takeaway. Managing your own expectations of your own perception. It's tricky, which is why we cannot do this alone, which is why you're not supposed to just have willpower and do this you do need to figure a lot of things out on your own because, like I said, the mind-body connection, and this will lead into my second point, is you need to be the expert of you. I have a soapbox and a rant that I am really trying not to go on right now because of something that happened this morning. I'll do it at the end. You need to be the expert of you to the certain extent where you can still get perspective from other people that interact with you, but you have to know and you have to trust yourself the most. Okay? You will not trust other people if you do not trust yourself. If you do not have things in place that reinforce that trust with your own perception, that is one of the biggest mental health concerns that I usually just have with people. And it's okay not to have trust in yourself right yet, but over time, the more actions that you take in your life, the more intention that you take with those actions, you should be building a trust within your perception. And that also includes making a mistake. Because if you do not make mistakes, then you do not build the discernment of critical thinking, of executive functioning skills. I don't become a good leader in dealing with people's emotions from getting it right every single time. I made mistakes. I pissed people off. I know, ooh, there's a boundary. Let me stay on this side of it so then I can figure out how do I expand it. So you being and becoming the expert of yourself requires you to do things that build immediate confidence and things that break you down, and you have to rebuild the confidence. The same way that they say, like, if you break a bone, you grow it back stronger as long as you're taking care of it and you follow the recommendations of the provider, is that without rupture, there is no repair. And we do not get strong without breaking down some kind of cell structure, tissue structure, and then nourishing it back to where it needs to be. The same thing happens with our belief systems and our behaviors and with our feelings. So leading into my second part, and this is the one thing that I would say, mental health, it's very abstract of a concept, but mental health is directly related to our relationship with time. And if you are attention deficit disorder, on the spectrum, depressed, or just a human, your relationship with time is extremely corrupt. I am making a generalization and assumption. You can call me out for it if you want to, but I know my perception of time is often corrupt. I sometimes have to remind myself that, and a lot of it is because I was always early, right? I had all this anxiety to be like, okay, I gotta be somewhere on time. That is unnecessary energy that we are spending. And so why I bring up time as my last point of this reflection is that timing is everything and everything is timing. And the more that you start putting in, and trying new things in your life, just little baby steps, right? And you start, sometimes when I do time budgeting exercises with my clients, it stresses the heck out of them. I don't expect you to be good at like the externalization of time, but trusting that the time will be right. And when if you're going to try fasting for not spiritual reasons, this is why I'm bringing timing into this, is because it was actually a little bit too long for my body in terms of fasting for 19 days. It was good for my body, but it also dysregulated my body at the same time. I became digestively dysregulated. We'll go with that. And honestly, this is a healthcare conversation. So constipation, it's a common problem that most people do not pay attention to when it relates to their mental health, but gut health is brain health and brain health is gut health. And so if you are someone that struggles with constipation or not being regular, that is one place to start. And that's why the relationship with food is so important, because we have to consider that eating too little is also what's causing the bloating. It's what's causing the gassiness. It's what's causing the constipation. Diarrhea as well as large stools are both forms of constipation. So if your gut microbiome, and I know that's a big word, but really it just means is that the bacteria in your gut is not happy, you are not feeding it correctly, and you're not feeding it consistently, then your timing is just going to be off. Your thinking is going to be off. That is a lack of clarity at its finest. So I made this about time is because I dropped weight pretty quickly. When you stop, putting fuel as well as water in, your body it's very resourceful. It uses what it already has in there. And so I saw myself thin out. And so I'm also still finishing this experiment because I went and I got my labs drawn probably in the second half of the fast, but about a week before the fast was over. And my labs came back, pretty normal. And I'm still going to go again and do a secondary lab probably in about a month just to see me resuming normality and eating healthy foods, but then also drinking more water if it's going to change at all. But my point saying is that I went and I weighed myself and I could tell that I had shed water and I had shed weight, but I got on the scale and I only lost 1.5 pounds. And I was like, what the frick? So timing is everything, but I will suspect, and I did take before and after pictures, so keep a lookout for those posts where I start posting about this, is the timing not only of when I weighed myself, but also managing my expectations of like, numbers are not going to be a true accurate perception of you, that you have to know your body. And you also have to remember, and this is where the rationalization that we have all used if we are overweight, is that muscle weighs more than fat. I did gain muscle. I gained definition. Like, if y'all can't touch this, and then this is just extra, but this is from me being intentional. I switched proteins. I was being able to, I was eating less, so my body was absorbing more of what was there. And this is where I had to trust the process. That timing is that when I was still fasting, my body went into survival mode. It was holding on to weight, to energy, because I had essentially sent it into stress mode. I was fasting, I want to say inappropriately. It was just inaccurately for what my body does. And I know that I retain water and I also retain weight when I'm under stress. So I mentally and emotionally was clear of that stress, but my body did not get that message. And as much as I was talking to myself, you definitely would think I was weird because I talk to myself all the time, and even in public. And but I was talking my body through it, and I was like, okay, maybe if I just remind it that like we are going to start eating again. But it wasn't until I got to the conference and I started putting food back into my body at the hour of the day that I'm typically used to, that I was able to release and get consistent again. So the body and the mind relationship is just very delicate, and it requires a lot of balance. And I don't think I would have picked that up if I had just been starting my weight loss journey. And for anyone who's starting a fitness health journey, weight loss, I would just remind you is that the intention is to release weight, not just lose weight, because your body does need to store nutrients, because there may be a situation, and I know there's a situation because most of my clients do this. They're like, oh, I haven't eaten all day and I just eat at night. Your body is going to hold on to weight. So if you are plateauing, if you are trying to get weight off quickly, it's not, you have to eat. You have to make sure that your mind and your body stay within a reasonable state of stress that it can trust to be able to release. So that was my last kind of point, and that's just in general, fasting with intention versus fasting to lose weight. I've done both throughout my life. I still would recommend doing the emotional work, because the transformation that you guys have seen in my life, and if you happen to be watching this right now, go to my story. I just posted another reel about, most of those photos are from 2019. So only just in the past 5 years, even though I say that I've been on this journey for almost 7 years, the first year was me just messing up. It was me fighting with all of the defense mechanisms in my brain about like, oh, mozzarella sticks are protein. And I still eat mozzarella sticks. I still eat French fries. I still eat that. But I'm not willing to sacrifice my brain health just for a certain body type. And I also need, in order to function at the capacity that I am as, an entrepreneur, as a trainer, as a coach, as a therapist, my brain uses the majority of my energy. And I need to be able to fuel that for clarity, for thinking. Most of that's water, though. No, I'm not gonna lie, and a lot of some natural carbohydrates, but it's really about the intention of like, how do you, for me, it was really just, I needed to be able to accept myself at every stage of change. I'm only 35. I don't have kids yet. I know my body's gonna change. I know I watch other women, they going through menopause, and my clients right now, the amount of dissatisfaction with ourselves, and that does not escape men, and it's not just women. I know people whose their self-talk is just so resistant to being okay with themselves. And I have those days too. I was like, I'm not putting a whole lot of makeup on today. And I started looking at my dark circles. Y'all can't really see it because of the light right now. And I was like, oh, I should put concealer on. And I was like, Sarah, stop it. Because my perception is more than just how I feel about myself. And just because I'm looking in the mirror does not mean that I need to make sure it's okay all the time. But for me, my journey, it was important for me to be a role model for acceptance at every step of the way, every change. Because trust me, there's a lot of changes going to be happening. We're still in the period of it's going to get worse before it gets better from a societal level. And you have to be able to check back in and like the home that you're always with. And so if that is something that you struggle with, like I said, I've officially launched my course and my program. So it is a more psychoeducational course that walks you through all the steps of the relationship with food as with self, and comes with coaching. You can do the course, almost credentialed for continuing education for healthcare providers. So I will let y'all know when that happens. But if you do need that coaching as well, it does come with a fitness component, but I'm teaching you more how to be your own coach in the gym versus just it being a trainer. Yeah, so that's there for y'all. Hopefully those reflections help someone, but I'm gonna go dive into some work now, and then I can get outside and enjoy the little bit of weekend that I have today. So you guys have a great Friday. I will see you back next Friday. I don't know my topic yet, but I've been having a lot of downloads recently about like things that people are going through, and that just little snippets of things, to consider and help your perspective of the world be a little bit nicer and more kind. So have a great day, and I will see you soon.